Welcome. Today, I'd love to share with you one of the best defenses for black against white's first move, pawn to e4, the French defense. This opening is great for black for several reasons. First, it is very solid, helping you avoid early opening disasters, especially those targeting the vulnerable f7 square. Many aggressive setups, like the bishop to e4 sacrifices and the fried liver attack, rely on exploiting this weakness, but the French defense immediately reinforces it with e6. Another key advantage of the French defense is that it isn't heavily reliant on memorization. Instead, success comes from understanding correct plans and solid positional play, which you'll learn in this video. Meanwhile, your opponents may struggle in these structures, especially when they can't find immediate attacking moves or a clear plan. Finally, even though the French defense is known for its solidity, I'll show you my favorite variation, one that is extremely tricky. In fact, about 80% of your opponent's possible moves can quickly lead them into disaster. Let's break this down step by step. After we play duel 5, attacking white's e4 pawn, they'll need to respond. Typically, they have three main options. Advance variation e5, white pushes the pawn forward, gaining space in the center. We'll discuss how to handle this effectively. Classical variation, nc3. White defends the pawn with their knight, leading to a more standard setup. Exchange variation, xd5, white trades pawns on d5, opting for a symmetrical and often drawish position. But don't worry, I'll show you how to make it more exciting. Let's start by looking at e5, the advance variation. Since e5 is the most popular move, it's the one you'll face most often. So, what should you do here? Once white gains that space advantage, it can feel a bit restrictive since your pieces don't have easy squares to develop. That's why your plan is to attack their pawns. Once they push forward, they also become vulnerable targets. You start with c5, immediately challenging white's central pawn. If they casually trade it off, not only do you free your position and develop your bishop, but their e5 pawn becomes isolated, an easy target for you in the long run. This makes white's position weaker, as they'll constantly have to defend it. For this reason, white usually doesn't capture. Instead, they reinforce their center with c3, maintaining their pawn chain. But that's not a problem. You simply increase the pressure by developing your knight to c6, adding even more tension to the central battle. White might continue with knight to a3, a standard developing move that also helps solidify their center. Now instead of going for the mainline queen to b6, I recommend a trickier move, bishop to d7. Let me show you why this works so well. At this point, white usually wants to develop their light-squared bishop and castle. But where should the bishop go? A common mistake is placing it on b5, which looks natural, similar to the Ruy Lopez setup. However, in this position, it's already a blunder. Here's the trick. You can play knight takes e5, an unexpected tactical shot that is incredibly hard for white to spot. If they capture your knight, you simply take their bishop on b5, winning a pawn while also preventing them from castling. If instead, white tries to take your bishop on d7, they run into even more trouble. Let's take a closer look. Now, you don't have to give up your knight. You simply drop it back to d7, and in the process, you also win white's central pawn, which is a great outcome. In the main line, white typically develops their bishop, placing it in an active position. This makes sense because white expects you to castle kingside, and this bishop will be an important piece in their potential middle game attack. But of course, we have something prepared against that. You play rook to c8, which on the surface just looks like simple queenside development. However, at the same time, you're setting up some dangerous traps. For example, if white castles kingside, which many of your opponents will do instinctively, they've already made a positional mistake. Even top players have fallen into this. There's a game where Hikaru Nakamura played this move years ago and ended up losing because of it. Once white castles, you immediately trade on d4 and follow up with knight to b4, putting serious pressure on white's bishop on d3. This is crucial because that bishop is white's key attacking piece in the middle game, and if you can force it off the board or weaken its position, you'll take control of the game. If you can eliminate this bishop early, you'll have no problems in the middle game. Now, if white tries to save the bishop by retreating to e2, they've already made a losing mistake. You immediately jump in with knight c2, and suddenly, their rook in the corner is completely trapped. This also highlights the hidden purpose of placing your rook on xiao8. Without it, white could simply capture your knight. But since the rook is already there, this tactic works perfectly and you win material. Of course, the best option for white is to give up the bishop and continue with knight to c3. In that case, you simply trade it off, securing a very comfortable position. Now, it's time to complete your development. Since your knight can't go to f6 because of white's central pawns, you route it via knight to e7, aiming for the strong f5 square. From there, it will put pressure on white's center and contribute to your attack. If white tries to slow down your development with a pin on g5, you can simply play h6, forcing them to make a decision. This forces white to make a decision with their bishop. If they trade on e7, there's no issue. You simply recapture and develop your bishop, gaining the two-bishop advantage. If they try to keep the pin with bishop to h4, you have multiple ways to handle it, but the simplest is queen to b6, a common move in the French defense. This move does three things at once: breaks the pin, freeing your knight, targets the b2 pawn, forcing white to react, adds pressure to d4, which could become a weakness later. Right now, white must deal with the b2 pawn threat. If they defend it, your knight is no longer pinned, meaning you can finally jump to knight f5, putting immediate pressure on white's position. If white continues with something like bishop to g3, you can calmly finish development and castle, with a comfortable and active position. Without the bishop on d3, white has no real attacking plan in the middle game. Meanwhile, you keep increasing pressure on d4 pawn, planning rook to c4 to attack further and potentially double rooks on the c file. White is left without a clear plan, which is exactly what you want in the French defense. Of course, white can try to prevent this by playing pawn to a 3, stopping knight to b4. But here's the trick. You trade on d4 pawn and follow up with queen to b6, targeting the weak d4 pawn. Right now, you are already attacking the d4 pawn twice, threatening to capture it. In the French defense, a key strategy is attacking the base of white's pawn chain. While the e5 pawn is well supported, the d4 pawn lacks protection and becomes an easy target. If it falls, the e5 pawn will soon follow. The immediate threat is knight takes d4. White cannot defend with bishop to e3 because that would drop the b2 pawn, also attacking the rook on a 1. Instead, white must play bishop to c2, allowing the queen to help defend d4. Now you have a surprising move, pawn to g5, creating immediate chaos. If your opponent is not well prepared, they are likely to collapse within just a few moves. White has a couple of ways to respond, and one logical option is to capture the g5 pawn. Why would white take this pawn? First, it's a free pawn, which they can capture with either the knight or the bishop. Second, if white ignores it and plays another move, you can push the pawn to g4, forcing their knight on f3 to move. Once the knight is displaced, you'll be able to capture the d4 pawn with either your queen or knight, gaining a strong central advantage. White might try to counterattack with knight to a4, attempting to disrupt your plans. However, you simply drop your queen back to c7, keeping your position solid. This knight on a 4 still has to move eventually, and once it does, you can unleash a powerful tactical shot. Knight takes d4. This move creates multiple attacking opportunities, putting pressure on white from all directions. This is one of the beautiful aspects of the French defense. A solid setup quickly transforms into an aggressive attack. If white responds with queen takes d4, you capture the bishop on c2, gaining material and threatening their knight. If white moves the knight, you continue with pawn to h6, trapping their knight on g5. At this point, white's position is collapsing, and you have strong follow-up ideas like rook to c4 or bishop to c5, securing a winning position. If you think this video is helpful, then like and stay tuned by subscribing to watch the next part of this video. Thanks for watching.